Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the minigame podcast. Today is Monday, May 5th. We'll do about an hour warm up, I would guess, and then we'll jump into the video game news. I have made a small step in potentially getting rid of the warm up, but only mentally. We'll scroll down the SteamDB 24-hour peak concurrent list of players, also to see what people have been playing over this period. I guess today is Cinco de Mayo, and I feel like Mother's Day, even though I may have said in the previous stream was last weekend, may have been this weekend. So yeah, there's not a lot of news today. Didn't seem like too much happened over the weekend. The biggest news that happened on Friday was the last remnants of Giant Bomb seemingly falling apart, and with that also I think Polygon was acquired and laid off a bunch of people too, if that matters to people. Of course, the big video game news would be Clair Obscur Expedition 33 being a massive success, and almost certainly we'll cover that in a news story later. I guess the only real question here is, will we have an overcompensation now where all of a sudden you see 5+ new French studios formed, all trying to make rip-offs of Clair Obscur instead of doing something different? It wouldn't hurt if there was 2 or 3 new French companies trying to rip off Clair Obscur, but 5 would be too many in my mind. Okay, so as far as Giant Bomb went, I found an archive video of that last bombcast in which they were making fun of the brand guidelines, and I don't think they were being really too offensive on it, really, in my opinion, but I think probably the new owners made the horrible mistake, and I guess this is a lesson all people should learn, is that if you're corporate and you've got a podcast or a radio station, because this is exactly the kind of thing that Howard Stern or Opie and Anthony would have done decades previously, and so you would have known that there's a high chance this would have happened. So you would put in big red letters at the top, do not discuss this on the air. This is private confidential information, do not discuss this on the air. Reveal any discussion, any revealing of this information is grounds for immediate termination. If it said that and they still got fired, well then fine, they deserved it, and they knew they were probably going to get fired anyways. But the actual brand guidelines that were being thrown down weren't inherently restrictive. Really, the whole thing just felt like, okay, here's a standard memo they probably give to everybody as far as what they're going for, and it was mostly that they wanted to just keep it to a PG-13 level on the podcast, to, I assume, maximize your audience. Which, in fairness, I don't think the Giant Bombcast needs to be anything above PG-13, and I think most of the time it wasn't above PG-13. There definitely were some times where they would get lazy in their language on the Bombcast. I recall from years ago where you would just have them saying effing a lot as a replacement word, and I think Jeff Grossman in particular, I recall, was doing that quite a bit. And so yeah, maybe you needed even then to beep some people, and just retrain them and tell them to focus on retraining so that they're not just using the F word as a replacement word. But it never really was said particularly in large amounts of anger. It was often just in lack of vocabulary amongst them. I'm repeating myself here, so. But yeah, the other brand guidelines seem fine. I mean, basically the same brand guidelines I think I would follow if I was in a corporation, and It's kind of the brand guidelines I would institute in a corporation, is just to say, hey, we're trying to keep this like the PG-13 movies, and so we're doing just about the same thing as PG-13 movies do. And inherently for me, my biggest struggle on any kind of brand guidelines, and just as far as how you're supposed to go, would probably be talking in too explicit detail about adult games, or even in cold scientific detail about adult games. That would probably be it. And inherently, as a YouTube content creator, like all other YouTube content creators, there are family-friendly guidelines that we are asked to follow, and they are incredibly cryptic, whereas these brand guidelines that they were making fun of really were telling them exactly what not to do. And they didn't inherently just immediately go down the line and break all the guidelines either, but they eventually, I think, did throughout the podcast. The thing that's most striking about that final bombcast, that was how it was really just a group of 4 people who totally were not the same people who were at Giant Bomb 5-10 years ago. And so it's just a totally different group of people, and a totally group of people that I never really learned to like, and if anything, I learned to hate them more, or dislike them strongly. I don't really have any hate in my heart for any of them. Maybe Jeff Grubb is about the worst of them, but I have no real reason to hate him other than it's just lack of journalistic integrity, which inherently, I guess that is the problem with Giant Bomb in a nutshell, is that while they could have had the facade of being a bunch of frat bros, they probably should have had some journalistic integrity behind that. Also, secretly always been a journalist. Although inherently, the attitudes and the frat bro fun from early whiskey media evolved into very much narrow-minded, focused on a smaller and smaller group of games that they were talking about, saying less and less about new games, and certainly just not willing to engage with games that were more frat bro-ish. And they were weirdly, just as California people, they got woke a little bit too, not much, but a little. And that's reflected in another podcast, I think it was called Video Game Bees, with Jeff Gersman being on that podcast, and he discussed his complete total lack of knowledge of anything going on with Giant Bomb being shut down. But in that podcast, he also talks about the new trailers for Borderlands 4 and how he just has really no interest in Borderlands, and that he liked the first 2 games, but by the time they got to the 3rd, he was over it, and he just felt like it was a game that kind of should be canceled, for lack of a better term, or has self-canceled itself and changed itself quite a bit, which would be my description of Borderlands as a series, is that they dropped the offensive humor aspect, and in dropping that, since that was really the core personality trait of the Borderlands series, that destroyed the personality of the whole series. So yeah, kind of big news, kind of not. It's kind of just the inevitable very much happened. It could have been 10 years from now and the same thing would have happened. There would just have been fewer people who even cared about Giant Bomb anymore, fewer people who were still at Giant Bomb as employees. But it was just inevitable. The biggest thing certainly there is that Jeff Gersman being allowed to be in charge for those last couple years led to a weakening of leadership, and with the weakening of that leadership You bring in Dan Reichert to replace him, and he's not much of a leader either, from what I can tell. And so there was just no strong controlling personality there, and so obviously it was going to fall apart. There's just nobody steering the horse at that point. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I didn't work on my macros. Instead, I finished Blackwell Deceptions, the second playthrough, going through the commentary. This is just a nightmare and a stupid decision on my part to have done that. And then I started playing the Talos Principle 2, which was going kind of great for a couple hours, and then I started to run into crashing. And I've been running into crashing with Firefox too. So inherently, I eventually got it beat into my head that it was something wrong with my RAM, and I don't know if I fixed it or not. But yeah, my computer has constantly had problems with the RAM, and I just don't know of a way to really be certain that I fixed it. I did find a way to test to see if I can make my computer really use the RAM using a program called MemTest. I think it's MemTest 64. And when I run that with Talos Principle running in the background and OBS open, I can see that OBS drops to a crawl as CPU utilization drops, raises to 100%. So it'll go from saying it could capture 60 frames per second to it's capturing 1 frames per second. But I mean, that is intentionally maxing out your computer CPU usage, and shows how OBS is heavily CPU bottlenecked, even if it does use your GPU for encoding. There's a lot of other stuff that OBS is doing. And my CPU in particular has never been particularly well balanced to my graphics card ever since I put the 2080, I think that's in it, in. But I've been all over the place trying to see if it was some kind of video setting first that was a problem. And even though it likely seems like it isn't a video setting, I am disappointed that Talos Principle 2 only runs at medium settings when auto detected. But yes, it's a pretty new game and my computer is pretty old, but there's really no reason why the Talos Principle should be pushing the graphics that hard. There is a weird situation specifically with the Talos Principle 2 in that it is effectively Crow Team teaching themselves how to use the Unreal Engine, because they were using, I think it was called the Crow Engine, or the Sirius Engine, maybe it was the name of it before. So now they're using a third-party engine and learning that, and they're selling a game on the back of it. And so I definitely have seen some rocks floating in the air and some visual glitches that may not be intentional, and lots of pop in, and just the standard things you expect to see from a poorly optimized Unreal Engine game. But yeah, also they're pushing the graphics way too high for a puzzle game, which doesn't really need the graphics to be that high. It would have been much nicer if the Talos Principle 2 felt very much like the Talos Principle 1 5 years down the road, which is probably about the difference between the release dates of the two, and just performed better, because I kind of feel like I even had some problems with the Talos Principle 1, and I would have had the same computer then, more than likely at that point. So it seems like the Talos Principle constantly keeps pushing me to build a new computer, and I have a new computer components to put together, and I'm thinking I may just take extra time and go ahead and build my new computer, which I'm already past the 30 days return window for any components. So the fact that I haven't tried anything or powered anything on is just insane. I just got really busy. You know, the whole tariff things was on my mind, which at this point I think tariffs are just in full effect, but it will trickle in that places with big warehouses like Amazon.com and Walmart probably have a decent amount of stuff in warehouses that they can sell at a discount and kind of clearance it out, and then just not restock their shelves in the warehouse. And they may do that, or they may just price gouge and increase the price anyways. But yeah, if something was already in the United States, then you wouldn't be paying a tariff for it. Of course, that means small business and even big business that was doing a lot more of the just-in-time shipping is going to immediately reflect tariffs at a much higher level. Whereas Amazon.com and Walmart also could just absorb some of the loss of sales by shutting down some warehouse storage facilities that they own and just saying, hey, we're no longer going to rent this building because we no longer have anywhere as much stuff to sell, which that might be what they do. I don't know how I even got on that one. But yeah, there was like another 8-bit controller, speaking of tariffs, that they're just seemingly going to stop selling altogether in the United States. And so I think Amazon.com in particular is clearancing them out. So the Ultimate 2C in pink went on sale for like $13. Yeah, a decent Hall effect controller. I think it was wired, not wireless, but even a wired controller for $13 is way better than the $80 or $60 you're going to end up spending for a PlayStation or an Xbox controller or Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons or a Pro controller. So yeah, there's that deal. And still seeing some slick deals even at Newegg if you really want to risk buying something at Newegg these days, in that you could get some major components and probably enough on sale to still build a computer, which yeah, this may very well also be a case that there was a glut of extra things shipped before the tariffs kicked in, and now they have too much in the warehouse and they are clearancing things out. I'm still playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, their new card decks, and they're doing a sneak peek event with the Wonder Picks, and they've added new single player stuff, so we're getting more of what they have to offer, but what they have to offer for Pokemon TCG is still particularly almost nothing, and really still not doing a good job of convincing people to play. I'm more motivated to continue to play Madoka Magica, but I believe, at level 92 out of level 120, and I think I might be maybe 3 or 4 chapters left in the entire story. At least in 2 places it feels like I've hit the wall until they add more content. And so yeah, I'm just like maxing out this game. I am also still playing Memento Mori, but there's literally nothing new you can do at Memento Mori. Not new, there's literally nothing extra you can do on a day-to-day basis for Memento Mori, even having 2 accounts on it. So they have their new character and they're doing a special event for that new character, which really just has you doing the same things you would have done for the dailies anyways, but gives you some extra reward. It is an odd kind of triangle there, and I'm not sure if it's a pure triangle, in that I would like Memento Mori to let me play more, and since it's an idle game, you don't really control the characters, so you can't really play more. I would like Yu-Gi-Oh! Pocket to encourage me to play more with rewards, and then I would like Magica Modica to have more content for me to play, because yeah, particularly for Magica Modica, I'm going to hit the wall pretty quickly. For Pokemon TCG Pocket, I have hit the wall, and for Memento Mori, I am at the wall and have been there for a long time, although Memento Mori does have a small possibility that eventually you'll level up your characters and then get a big burst further in the game. There is a lot more content in Memento Mori that I haven't unlocked. There's like 43 chapters, I think, at least. I'm at like chapter 23 in Memento Mori, and that's after playing for a whole year. But those high level chapters are extremely difficult to reach, particularly if you're free to play. Whereas Pokemon barely has any content, and just collecting cards is the only thing you're focusing on there. And then, yeah, again, Magica Modica has story chapters, and yeah, I've started doing the harder nightmare mode on story chapters. I've already done, and I'll get as far as I can with that, and then that'll be it, I imagine, for the story mode. And on top of that, I'm getting more than enough resources, it feels like, that I'm going to have most of the characters maxed out in like a year at the most. And so they're going to have to constantly churn out new versions of the same characters, because I don't think they really can make new characters from scratch, which is what they really need to have the ability to do. And that's the problem with having an anime tie-in into your game. So yeah, I'm expecting I'm going to max out on my Magica Modica maybe in 3 weeks or so, and then I'll do the dailies, but it will take a lot less time, which is good, because then that'll give me more time to continue playing real video games instead of wasting the massive amount of time I am spending these days with the watching with Android cell phone games. There is another thing, I guess. I finished Monk on Prime Video, and then watched some of season 2 of The Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Those episodes are rough. They're sped up and kind of boring. It kind of feels like the anime episodes are just teasers to a manga series that would have had more details and gone longer, and so that it just doesn't feel like a good offering there at all. Monk, when it got to the end, had a 2-part ending that revealed the big mystery of his wife being killed in very much a fairly boring but serious, not as silly, anywhere as silly as the other episodes all around it, which that last season of Monk in particular just had a random assortment of episodes that feel like they could be played in any order and it wouldn't really matter. And I still don't feel like the Sharona episodes overall are better quality. There's just so many other episodes with the second assistant that it's just impossible to have even the level of nostalgia that the final finale did with Sharona. They used old footage of her quite a bit, which just feels like he probably should have just forgotten about that. But yeah, I just don't think Monk ever quite figured out how to be as fun as Psych was, with its feel and personality. And I think a big part of that is just Tony Shalhoub, the actor who plays Monk. I think he's a stick in the mud and maybe just a rough actor. It feels like they could have probably after 2 or 3 seasons started to cure him of some of his conditions, and they did a little bit of that, but then the conditions would come back up. But yeah, if they had just gotten him down to germophobia, extreme germophobia, and less cheapskate, which isn't even really a mental condition, that would have been good. They did eliminate his inability to make a decision for the most part, as that gag was running dry. Oh, by the way, what I did, might as well mention it, what I did is I took off 4G decode in the BIOS and resizable bar support, both of which would allow more RAM from the video card VRAM to be transferred to the CPU in a bigger chunk, which theoretically should give you better performance of processing and rendering frames, but apparently it also can cause some instability. So those are the 2 things I've changed on my computer to hopefully prevent it from crashing things. But there's really no guarantee that that was the right thing to do. After finishing Monk, I know I'm bouncing around here, sorry about that. I started to watch The Bondsman with Kevin Bacon, and yeah, so far it's alright. It kind of feels like it's Supernatural-esque, except for this time it's a bail bondsman who immediately is under the control of the devil, and seems like he's kind of a jerk character too, and they call him out on that, and that's why he went to hell in the first place, and that's why the devil sent him back to capture other demons who escaped. I guess he's not technically a demon. It's a little southern though, so, and inherently I think Supernatural in its first few seasons maybe was a little bit southern too. Stayed in the south, was a lot of road journeys in the south, but eventually it started to not be northern per se, but be more bland in the personality, as far as just less southern accents and more approachable, I guess would be a good term. In that you look at a episode in season 15 of Supernatural that you're not gonna say, hey, this is something that feels like it should have been on TNT, or TBS. Yeah, I guess TBS is what I'm really thinking about there. Turner Broadcast Service. But yeah, that accents in general can, I think, hurt a show. I could definitely see people watching episode 1 of The Bondsman and going, yeah, this is a little too redneck for me, particularly in today's day and age where a country bumpkin anywhere is going to be looked down upon by a more sophisticated style of person. And yeah, I haven't gotten but just a couple episodes into it, so I'm not sure I'm ready to say whether I like it or not. I think what's going to happen is it's probably going to get 1 season and it'll be alright, and then Amazon.com, Amazon Prime Video will probably, hey, Sierra Entertainment was 45 years ago that Sierra Entertainment was formed. Let's open that link and see what, if we can find a list of all the games Sierra Entertainment put out. Wolfenstein 3D, in contrast, is Sierra's text-based point-and-click like adventures, although I think more text-based, at least to begin with. Well, Wolfenstein 3D is a first-person shooter. Yeah, I imagine Amazon will give it a second season just out of desperation. And that would be the wise thing to do, because they just need as much new content as they can to even begin to try and compete with Netflix. It's also worth pointing out that Jeff Bezos just said he was going to sell off like $4 billion worth of Amazon stock. Which, yeah. That probably won't change much, though. So I guess to get deeper into the Talos Principle 2, it's a different game. It's a very, very different game from Talos Principle 1. The Talos Principle 1, you wake up in this robotic body. You have this voice almost constantly speaking to you called Elohim that portrays himself as a god. And then you're going through these puzzles. And the puzzle part you can really just take in silence and enjoy quite a bit. And I will say Talos Principle 2 still has that. The puzzle part you can take in silence and enjoy quite a bit. The difference is, in the Talos Principle 2, there's a prologue, so there's entire acts. And in this prologue section, you are the 1000th robot to have been booted up. And you are in a city called New Jerusalem, run by robots. And you have this event that occurs that sends you off towards an expedition on an island. But before you go to the island, you can wander around New Jerusalem and talk to all the robot people. I would say there's at least a dozen people to talk to, lots of things to look at, lots of things to investigate. As such, I spent, I think, 3 hours in the prologue section just looking around New Jerusalem and talking to people, and I really only maybe did about a third of it. And so it's questionable, really, if I'm gonna end up in a middle point and return to New Jerusalem, which I think we probably will, to talk to more people. Once you actually start the game and get to Act 1 and are on the island, there are about 6 other robots that wander around and investigate with you. They don't solve any of the puzzles or go into any of the puzzles, but they do walk around, and they do very often have new lines of dialogue and conversation with you. 10 years ago, Black Mesa was released. Which, man, I really sometimes feel like I blinked and slept 10 years away. Well, the early access version was released 10 years ago. So let's open that and see when it actually was released, because that was way less than 10 years ago. That makes more sense, actually. So, yeah, you're just not alone in Talos Principle 2. And you're doing puzzles that at the very beginnings feel like the puzzles in Talos Principle 1. But then, pretty quickly, you have a new interaction, new puzzles, a new way of thinking, and a new item in particular that just flips everything upside down. And so it kind of inverts your entire thought process. And so it's like starting all over again. It's just like, oh, this is the discovery of gravity, effectively, which yeah, or the discovery of magnetism, I guess, maybe a better example. Like, if you didn't know magnetism existed and you solved all the puzzles in the Talos Principle 1, which none of those actually use magnetism, so that's a fine example. And then in the second game you realize, oh, magnetism exists, and every single object that existed in Talos Principle 1 could have been magnetized, and you could have solved all of these puzzles in a very different way. I mean, it's kind of amazing that they could even do that. Now, that's a bad explanation of what's really going on, and it's not really the case. But it's the feeling that's like that. What really happens is you get new items, and the new items interact with the old items in a very different way, almost in an opposite way. And I'll only spoil a little bit to kind of explain this. In the first game, you have laser puzzles where you have like red, green, and blue laser transmitters and red, green, and blue laser receivers, and you have to use laser redirectors to connect those 2 points, the receiver and the transmitter, of the same color. In the first area of the Talos Principle 2, you get an object that is like a laser redirector, but instead of redirecting a blue transmitter laser to a blue receiver, you take a red and green transmitter, combine them together, and then it gives you the color that's missing. Which, I mean, both scientifically is ridiculous and I think pretty much impossible, but also just like a crazy way to think. So all of a sudden now I'm not looking for a combination of 2 colors, which you never really were doing that in the first game anyways, or a specific color, but I'm looking for the inversion of 2 colors, which, yeah, that is wild. And that's just the first object. Pretty much every location of 9 seems like it's going to have a new object that changes the puzzles up. Also, I think I bought all the DLC for the Talos Principle 2, so there's also, it looks like there's going to be 3 more things to do after finishing the story. Elohim in the first game is based off the Jewish god, or Judeo-Christian god. You deal with Prometheus and Pandora and the Sphinx in the Talos Principle 2. So, if anything, I think theology is going to play a much lesser role in the Talos Principle 2, and philosophy is going to play a bigger role. You're just talking to a lot more people. There's a whole chat forum aspect to the game that is always available to you, and yeah, here we can see that it officially was released on Windows in 2015, so they were in early access for 5 years. But this is also relevant because there are now rumors 10 years later from this that Half-Life 3 is very close to actually being released, which, listening to Half-Life 3 rumors is insane, certainly, but it is something to at least think about. Life/2 Half-Life. How do you get to sequels on this website? Moby Games seems not to really list sequels. Interesting. It has related games, but not specifically sequels. So yeah, I'm pretty hyped about Talos Principle 2, and I want to play it. In particular, I want to play it to get the 70 gigs that it's taking up of my hard drive off of it, but the fun and excitement I may be having around the story and the puzzles is being heavily tampered by crashing. Which, yeah, that is definitely not fun. Fingers crossed my new computer never crashes once. Particularly since I plan on putting Steam OS on it. I guess at this point, I don't think I'm even going to bother to try to do Bakelite. I'll try Steam OS, and if the install goes badly, I'll do Bakelite at that point. So, Sierra Entertainment, they are credited for 619 games from 1980 to 2017. The Leisure Suit Larry 1 being one of those, which, interesting. Fear Files being one of them? How could they all be, how could Sierra be involved with all of that? In 2014, Sierra's website was reactivated, stating more to be revealed, according to Moby Games. Okay, credits, games. Let's just click games and see what that does for us. Yeah. Not safe for work. Is Leisure Suit Larry really not safe for work in modern times? Who knows? Gabriel Knight Sins of the Father. This was the 2017 version, apparently, re-release of the game. This might very well be the awful one that got delisted. No, I don't think it is. Space Quest, Quest for Glory, Legend of Spyro, Dawn of the Dragon. Sierra definitely had their fingers in a lot of other games that you wouldn't inherently expect. Fear, somehow they were involved in some of that. Time Shift, seriously. And I don't think they were just publishing these games. Certainly not what I expect from Sierra. Scarface. I was definitely expecting King's Quest collections and the original King's Quest games. If EA and I think Monolith Studios was the main people behind Fear have just laid off everybody, maybe Sierra is right on the verge of acquiring the rights to a bunch of these old games. Well, of course they're not gonna get the rights to like Half-Life 2, but maybe the Leisure Suit Larry series all of a sudden is gonna be published by Sierra, and that's why it's been delisted from Steam. And maybe it's not really a censorship thing so much. Maybe EA right now is selling off any rights it may have had to games. Pinball collection. Generic name. Let me see if I recognize that. I'm spending too much time going through history here. Yeah. In fact, let's, after this page, not go any further, because this is gonna take too long if I go down another 10 pages. Boy, is this a long list. And I wouldn't have inherently realized that the Hoyle games were Sierra, or the You Don't Know Jack games were Sierra. I do think they probably have only minimal interaction with some of those games too, and that they aren't the main people. Yeah, Sierra was the publisher of like the pinball collection here. Yeah, let's see if I can find any screenshots. Nope, doesn't even have any screenshots. Yeah, closest to a screenshot is I'd have to magnify this and just look at this, and no, I don't think I recognize this pinball collection. And yeah, there's another issue certainly as I played a Talos Principle 2. I will also mention, and since it's such a visually demanding game, I imagine the recordings I'm making are very big, and so I'm going to fill up my other hard drive, which I record to if I'm not careful. So it's just going to be record, upload as much as possible. Yeah. That is my plan, I suppose, for at least the next few days, probably a week at least, maybe a lot longer. And I'm still cleaning and decluttering. Mostly what I'm doing is going through photos right now, and it's just sorting photos and deciding what I want to do with them. Yeah, there is a paranoid argument, and I will say this is full-on tinfoil hat paranoia, but I am someone who understands IT to a certain level, so there is a truth to this. But there is a real tinfoil hat paranoid argument to make, to say never take photos of anybody. Never take photos of yourself. Never take photos of your children. We aren't really in a situation now where you take photos and you'd have them developed or printed, although I imagine there are some services out there where you could print photos. Now, why do I say that? Well, the problem is we already know that, we'll look at my probably still useless chart here for a second. We already know that your average police have the capability of working with the FBI to age up photos. So a missing child that may have gone missing when they were 2 can be aged up to be 16, 18 years old, and it looks decent enough to actually match that person. And that technology has been around for a long time. Now, what I just suggested is a counter argument to my suggestion, my tinfoil hat suggestion of never take photos. If you have children, having recent photos of what they look like makes a lot of sense. In fact, it makes a lot of sense to take a photo of your kids every time they're going to any kind of event at all, just so you know what clothes they're wearing and what they look like that day, going to the park even, or going to a bigger carnival or something like that, where we're going to the mall. Like there's a real argument to take it on your phone, and then I guess if you don't have automatic backup and you delete those photos later, the photos are probably pretty safe, assuming something hasn't hacked your phone. But the argument for the tinfoil hat of never taking pictures is that we know the technology to age up people has been around for a long time. We know that Photoshop has just gotten better and better as far as taking someone's face and putting it on someone else, or putting it in a different orientation to effectively frame somebody. And that has now expanded with the modern AI generation to a rapid pace of an expansion where now you need less and less images, still images. You don't even need video anymore to make a straight up deep fake of somebody. So if you want to even have a hope of protecting yourself or someone else, that there is now this argument of not taking photos. Of course, again, tinfoil paranoid thought. You would not be enjoying your life as much probably with that as your goal. And I will say, the real ID system in the United States has changed how the driver's licenses scan people. So it is much more of a 3D laser scan that the cameras are taking now, and then it is just a flat picture. Or at least it seems like that's what's going on. So even having a driver's license probably already puts a 3D model of your face into the hands of the government. Whether you want to trust the government or not doesn't matter, because the government often gets hacked. So it may be too late for everybody. Plus, you're probably captured on the cameras wandering around a city dozens of times a day, particularly in places like New York or London. But I imagine in most people's cases, you're captured on camera. Although most of those CCTV cameras are not particularly high quality, so I don't know if they could really do too much. So I would say, all in all, take off the tinfoil hat and take photos of your kids and just enjoy your life. But be aware of it. Be careful. We haven't heard any story yet of it being photos being found and being used against a person. Although almost certainly the cops have framed hundreds, if not thousands, of people with doctored photos. But yeah, there is a aspect here. You can see in the last 2 weeks I've played, or at least left it running for 21 hours. I must have left it running overnight though. I definitely have not been playing for 21 hours of the Talos Principle. It has a lot of achievements. I have 21 out of 87, so it kind of feels like you're gonna get a achievement for doing almost every puzzle, and then several other achievements. It is weird that the Talos Principle though also is way down here, and it's the most recent game I played. In contrast, the time played is even longer for Blackwell Deception, which I got all of the achievements on that. And one of the achievements is listening to all of the commentary, which I actually missed a couple of achievements on Unbound and Legacy. I feel like I probably will just waste even more time going back and trying to get those achievements on Steam. And then also I've been running 3D Mark. 3D Mark in particular is kind of useless to me as a benchmark, because it's very consistently telling me what my graphics card can do, which is not being affected or changed when I change how the RAM is running or anything like that. So yeah, we can also see my followed list is up to 8,121, which I think I did a little bit of follow list cleanup, but I don't think I actually accomplished anything large there. Obviously, Angel Legion back on the #1 spot. Still seeing Schedule 1 being popular, seeing more streamers play that. As far as streamers go, there's not a lot that's been new. House Party with is still a big one too, which I'm not sure I 100% remember if House Party actually has any adult content in it, or, I mean, it definitely has lewd content. I mean, you're basically in this house party trying to hook up with several characters. I don't know if it actually goes the full direction. The Eminence in Shadow, Master of Garden. This was an anime I watched it, I think it was pretty bad. But I would like to know what the reviews are on that. The big reason why The Eminence in Shadow as an anime is pretty bad is because it really is just a fantasy fulfillment of the main character. He's just like the strongest, most powerful person ever, and he's more obsessed about making himself look cool. And then all of his anime waifu elf girls are somehow even stronger and are just succeeding at a massive level to make him even stronger and more cool. But yeah, the anime itself is kind of ridiculous. He makes up an enemy organization to send these anime waifu elf girls after, just to kind of get rid of them, and they somehow end up finding the enemy organization that he made up, and then like he's isekai'd into a different world at the beginning of the show, and then at the end he's isekai'd to a different world. So it's like really crazy as far as just getting moved around. I'm actually surprised that this is even this positive and even has this high of numbers. It is definitely a mobile game. Why is that on the main page? It's just one of the top things. Maybe that is just a case that sometimes these top things are kind of random, or at least targeting me, which I did just click on it, so it targeted my interest that much. May the 4th happened, which is usually a Star Wars holiday type thing. I pretty much own all the Star Wars games. I'm willing to buy it right now, and frankly I'm really not in a great position to be buying extra games anyways. Yeah, I don't know what I could even do to burn through games to the point where I feel like I really need to buy more. I'm good. There's some newer games and some bigger AAA games that I still would want, obviously, but I could easily go without. Yeah, as I get older too, I really can't help but wonder if I'm just hitting the limit where I'll have enough games for the rest of my life. Enough games. I mean, I already have enough that I could play the same games multiple times for the rest of my life, as long as I didn't lose access to my computer or my account and the games don't become more demanding on my computer. But yeah, I'm feeling like I might be approaching the point where I have as many new games that I could play for the rest of my life. And a big part of that is just the amount of content I've been making lately has been low. Which, yeah, a big part of that still is trying to declutter my house and not getting very far with it at all. Psycho Patrol R. Well, that is a game I've not seen before, which is kind of saying something for the front page of Steam, because almost everything I've seen before. probably would be PC Mark 10 that would be more helpful, but you can see how that's mixed reviewed as a test software that is on Steam to test my RAM and see what's going on. But then MemTest64 is free. South of Midnight, still very positive. This one is on the follow list. I just don't know. First person shooter mecha hybrid Euro police sim with emphasis on interacting with NPCs. That just seems like a bunch of words. Here, go ahead and take that off and check this instead. If I can actually hit the box, you have to have the cursor fairly close to the center of the box for it to work. Yeah, and I'm still leaning towards buying some refurbed Steam Decks if I can get them, which it looks like I can get some. Just because, again, I just don't think that the Switch is going to be available. Switch 2 is going to be particularly available, and I don't think a Steam Deck 2 is coming out. Now, if these rumors for Half-Life 3 came out, that would be intriguing, but I just can't imagine Half-Life 3 is going to come out and a new Steam Deck 2 is going to come out. Just not with the current situation with tariffs and US-China trade wars going on. And I just don't think that there's going to inherently be something new in a Steam Deck 2 that was something game-changing that Half-Life 3 would engage with. I wouldn't be surprised if Half-Life 3 does have a gun that is more built around gyro controls that a Steam Deck has. Or just more built around having more button controls than your standard Xbox controller might have. But I'm not thinking that it's going to have something amazing that somebody has never thought about. Even when you start to think about other input devices for like presentations and industrial use and such, there really isn't much of anything that's been new. Persistence of vision screens might be interesting, certainly, if there was a high quality, high resolution version of one of those. Those are the spinning screens that make things that look like holograms, or actual hologram technology might be interesting. I don't know how you make a handheld do either one of those, although you probably could make a handheld that had a fold-up persistence of vision screen, which that would be somewhat game-changing, although I don't know how well a desktop really ends up looking. And you have a lot of moving parts in the persistence of vision screen, which makes it a weirder thought. If you could get some kind of spherical device that had touch all around it, so you could like wrap and stretch a touch screen around a sphere, that might be interesting, but I don't know if that kind of controller input would be something that people would become accustomed to. It is kind of crazy that the Steam Deck doesn't have, or SteamOS in particular doesn't have like built-in like Amazon Alexa type stuff where you can talk to it, it can act as a speaker. You could certainly have those kinds of things with software in the desktop mode, but if that was just part of the SteamOS client, that would be interesting, certainly, too. I don't know how you would integrate a Steam Deck or any handheld game into being a smart device, although certainly could have it integrate as a controller and a touchscreen to something like Home Assistant or Matter in some weird way. I'm just trying to think of all the technologies. Speaking of technologies, there was a slick deal for an electric lawnmower. It was a pretty good deal too. You could get a quarter acre per zone electric lawnmower. It wasn't one that used GPS though, so you had to put a invisible fence style radio wire down so it knows where not to go. But for like $380, well, it's not a terrible price for an electric lawnmower. Although the problem there is it only works for a certain number of people in certain locations. Your ground has to be relatively clear and flat, and you have to be in a region where you can't hire someone else to mow your lawn for cheaper than $380 over the course of 2 years, because that's probably about as long as the electric lawnmower might last, at least before you start throwing more money in it to replace its batteries. And just probably less maintenance overall otherwise. Boy, do I own a lot of these games on the Steam Deck. Yeah, no, I don't own them. They're wishlisted. The blue keeps making me think I own them when I don't. I lost my train of thought because I was talking about slick deals. And I'm still doing way too much shopping on slick deals. And yeah, I really would have expected the deals to start to dry up more. Let's see. Let's go through the Video Games Chronicle news now. We've warmed up about as much as I was going to get. I actually did a pretty good job too of guesstimating when I was going to start streaming. Saw the notification had come out. I will say my macro still has some bugs in it. Still need to work on it. So it moved all my tabs all around, so I had to spend extra time moving it, and it's still not opening links to Steam games when it references Steam games. So there's a bit of a problem there. So these stories may be out of order, but they will be from the same source. Video Games Chronicle in this case. So Nintendo is suing the accessory manufacturer that showed off the Switch 2 early. The 3D printed mock-up of the then unannounced Switch 2 was widely circulated in January. This would be the parent company of Genki Human Things, the court in California over trademark infringement, unfair competition, and false advertising, which I wonder how many, if any, of those things stick for what they did. But yeah, Nintendo has become really sue happy these days, and this kind of news is not the news that Nintendo really needs or would want to come out. So you would think they would more file these lawsuits quietly and then at the same time make big announcements about new games or the Switch 2 and try to get people more excited about the Switch 2. Maybe forget that the price is way too high. The accessory manufacturer Genki responded after being sued by Nintendo for showing off the Switch 2 earlier. The company showed off 3D printed mock-ups and renders before Nintendo's official reveal. Now inherently, I'm not even going to try to get into the weeds of this lawsuit because it could go in so many different ways, but if they just guesstimated the dimensions of the Switch 2 and they did not have any kind of corporate secrets, access to corporate secrets, then I would think legally they should be in the clear. I imagine they did have access to something though, imagine what happened is Nintendo sent off product dimensions as a corporate secret to a Chinese factory, and then the Chinese factory or some employee at the Chinese factory snuck out those product dimensions and leaked them. Although actual product dimensions feel like they are so scientific and generic and not creative that I don't know if they really would fall under the category of copyrightable or trademarkable in the first place. So what they may have screwed up with is they may have 3D printed a non-functional Switch 2 mock-up, but then put Nintendo Switch or Nintendo on it, instead of leaving it just blank. So if they had put the word Nintendo on it, then I could see trademark infringement or false advertising. Unfair competition, I don't know how you even really prove that, and that feels like that's weird that there is even a law that would cover unfair competition, since so many companies get away with that anyways. It would be nice, I guess, if unfair competition happens. Their response is, Genki has always been an independent company focused on building innovative. Show more. We're gonna go over to Twitter, I guess. Nah, it's not loading. Seems like there's a different comment here. Now it's loading up. Well, I've lost interest in the story anyways. It's important to point out that it would be anti-consumer if Nintendo was able to sue case manufacturers in particular out of business, because it definitely helps to have some competition around case manufacturers and accessory manufacturers around products like the Switch 2 or the Switch 1 even. Yeah. It's certainly going to be anti-competitive in that case. If all of a sudden Nintendo is the only one who could make any kind of accessory or any kind of case, there would be less options and higher prices, which gets back to the more important story of the massively higher prices that happen here. And Nintendo already has a decent amount of monopoly, probably too much, around the Switch 1 and Switch 2. Like, does anybody really make third-party Joy-Cons at all? I don't think so. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of trusted platform module inside each Joy-Con that prevents third-party Joy-Cons from connecting and syncing. I wouldn't be surprised if it's all proprietary secret code to wirelessly communicate between the two. Like, you would think that there would be a company that made Hall Effect Joy-Cons that were a little bit more durable, and then that would have been, those would have sold like hotcakes. Yes, people make third-party Pro controllers, but even those, I think, are stuck in that they aren't really competing with the original. Frankly, I think it's crazy that Nintendo is even allowed to have such a lockdown system in the first place. I think in 2025 it probably should be the case that any electronic device whatsoever must be capable of running and side-loading unlicensed software, and that you cannot effectively try and jail down cell phones and video game consoles and other devices. And that, yeah, And there's already, I think, some precedents with Android and Google around that. That's why Google lets you sideload and install apps, whereas Apple still doesn't make that easy and doesn't really let you do it. Moving on, let's see. Every Unova Pokemon is getting an illustration rare in the Pokemon Black and White Anniversary set. I don't know what Unova is, but I would assume it is a region. But it might be a rank of Pokemons. Video Games Chronicles still talking about Pokemon cards. Pokemon Black and White Anniversary will introduce a new rarity to Pokemon TCG. Black Bolt and White Flare will be released in Japan. And this new rarity, I don't know what they're going to call that new rarity. New rarity BWR. It assumes for black and white rare. Oh. Okay. Again, hard to care. More political wrangling. Bungie has failed to provide evidence for Destiny 2's copyright lawsuit because the content is, quote, vaulted. A judge has denied Bungie's motion to dismiss the case because it can't present the archived content in question, which that is an insane thing, I think, to tell a judge that potentially is going to get you fined, if not thrown in jail, is that, oh, we have this copyrighted information that the other side or the judge is requesting, and we can't give it to you because we put it in a vault, which means very likely you have to then assume that they have lost the evidence or it never existed in the first place. Yeah. Frankly, something like that could get you a default judgment, at which point the judge is just going to say, we're going to assume you're guilty and we're going to assume the worst. I mean, I just don't know how in the world you would not present the evidence or ask for more time. So the writer Matthew Kelsey Martineau sued Bungie last year for copyright infringement, alleging that Destiny 2's Red Legion was taken directly from his writings on WordPress 4 years before the game was released. Bungie filed a motion to have the case dismissed, stating that the examples cited by Martineau's suit are demonstrably different than Destiny 2 in his works, but the demonstrably part has become an issue for the studio. Much of the content being cited comes from Destiny 2's Red War campaign and DLC, like Curse of Osiris. However, because Destiny 2 is a live service with an evolving storyline, this content has now been placed in the Destiny content vault. Yeah, just replace the word with Destiny with Disney and see how silly that sounds. But it can be no longer accessed by players or even by Bungie itself. So it's not a vault so much as you deleted it. Like, I mean, seriously, you have no tape backups of your server? You know what? This is worse news for Destiny than even losing a lawsuit, which it looks like they're on the track to lose. Which, if they did lose a copyright lawsuit, you could see a judgment in the case of Destiny having to be shut down completely. You could go that crazy. But it's worse news for the fact that this tells us Destiny 2 was never designed in a way or maintained in a way that they could bring back the old content, like World of Warcraft has done with their relaunching of the old servers, which was super popular. And if you're making a live service game, you definitely should have that in your mind, that you should have backups to say, hey, we can bring back version 1.0 for a weekend or launch completely separate servers if people love that. We'll do that after we're done selling new content, but certainly you could do that. Bungie sent the court an affidavit by Destiny 2 game director Tyson Green, in which he explained why the studio was unable to provide the Red War or the Curse of Osiris content to the court in its original form. So they've also opened themselves up to anybody claiming that they stole their content in the Red War and the Curse of Osiris content. The Red War and Curse of Osiris legacy builds can no longer run because of their outdated code is incompatible with Destiny 2's underlying operational framework, which has evolved considerably. So you don't have backups of the underlying framework, is the claim. It doesn't matter. Give them the raw source code. This is an amazing excuse as far as stupidity goes. Like, literally just hand over the raw source code. In the original form, here is the raw source code we have. It is 40,000 pages long, if you were to print it out, of raw source code of the Red War and the Curse of Osiris. Have the other side have to pay interns and underling lawyers to crawl through the source code to find text version references that could be compared to what is claimed to be stolen. Yeah. I guess maybe the demand here was for it to be in an operable and reviewable form. Or reviewable form. Yeah, if the judge specifically phrased it, it must be operable and reviewable. Well, don't do operable if your servers can't handle it. Do it reviewable. There's no reason why raw source code shouldn't be reviewable. Turn what is a video game, interactive 3D model thing, just back down to its text-based source code. I imagine that would be at least something you could hand them. Now, that would buy you some more time if they came back and said, hey, we won't accept it in that form. Then you could argue between that. Instead, what they've done is to submit player-made YouTube videos and entries from fan-written Destinypedia Wikia explaining the lore of the now archived content. Man, Bungie has apparently no lawyers, because that's not going to work. Anyways, you cannot prove the validity of player-made videos, that they were recorded at any specific time. You can't call those players up to testify. You can't use a Destinypedia as a replacement for the original factor. Although inherently they didn't censure him, which they probably should. They have denied Bungie's motion to dismiss the case, so they clearly were throwing spaghetti at the wall and being lazy in this first attempt, trying to get the motion dismissed. But if they don't step up their game, and I hate that court cases are really games, but they effectively are, I think this case is going to go in Martinet's favor. And I guess, I don't personally know, but I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't too many people. There'll be a big chunk of gamers that would be upset if Destiny 2 got shut down completely, but that chunk of people is much smaller today than it was 4 or 5 years ago. Like, Destiny 2 is definitely dying, and Bungie itself is, I think, dying with it. Moving on, apparently Shuhei Yoshida says he partially saved Gran Turismo from failure by convincing its creator to tame the handling. Let's see, Kazunori Yamauchi wanted the game to feel a lot more realistic until Yoshida stepped in. This is one of those stories. And this is the former Sony Interactive Entertainment president, Shuhei Yoshida, once again being interviewed and talking. Of course, this kinds of stories really just don't matter. So we'll move on. Gears of War is officially coming to the PlayStation 5 in August. Now, which Gears of War is this, though? Apparently, the entire franchise is coming to PlayStation. Which, yeah, with the raise of the pricing of the Xbox, I can't, at this point, even begin to recommend anybody get an Xbox Series X or S or Xbox Game Pass. I think either you are going to stay stagnant and move over to a PlayStation 5, or it's just time to go to PC, which noticeably it's coming to PC also, and some of them already have come to PC. Gears of War Reloaded is a modernized version of the original Gears of War game. Features all the improvements from Gears of War Ultimate Edition plus some modern performance boosts, which probably helps it. I played some of the first Gears of War. I don't think I actually got to the credits of it, but someday I think I would like to probably try and play the original games, although it may not matter too much since I think they're kind of soft rebooting the whole series too. Plus you also have that back-end problem in that Marcus Phoenix, I believe is his name, stops being really the main protagonist in that last Gears of War game. But the idea of a Gamer Bro style game where it's big guns and dudes with goatees is what Gears of War is all about, and is very much what a lot of people are not about these days. So it will feel dated, almost certainly, playing it, to me. Compulsion Games insists Microsoft is enforcing generative AI on Xbox developers. South of Midnight's developer says it can absolutely guarantee AI is not mandated at Xbox, which mandated is a key term there. But I do believe South of Midnight did have some AI generated content, but I don't think there's actually a boycott happening around South of Midnight because it has AI in it. I just think that there was very poor advertisement and promotion for South of Midnight, and it's barely even something that's even being mentioned when it really should be talked about a lot more. I mean, I think South of Midnight and Clair Obscur are going to be very easy contrasts to compare, in that you have Microsoft behind Compulsion Games, owning them, putting very little effort to promote and push South of Midnight, and then Clair Obscur being a relatively previously unheard of French company. I think they are at least coming out with something new, and it just getting people really excited and playing and talking about the game through word of mouth. Which, yeah, I don't think Clair Obscura has spent a ton of time advertising it, but they definitely advertised it. I definitely remember seeing several videos and announcements around it. So here's the big news also, speaking of being excited. Half-Life 3 is playable end-to-end. Valve Insider claims the game is being playtested religiously and widely, it's reported. Now, is this going to be Tyler McVickerson as a Valve Insider? Once again, the guy who used to call his YouTube channel Valve News Network, and who really only gets attention when he announces something about Half-Life, so almost all his streams are somehow connected to Half-Life 3. Yes, it is. Tyler Mavicker. Which increasingly, there's just less and less. Every time he streams, every time he says something, less and less reason to actually believe what he's saying. And I don't know if it's even really 50% his fault. I think it often is. He just will speculate, and he's putting like speculation up in the corner. And even when there's speculation in the corner and he says this is just speculation, people will quote him and make it seem like he has some insider knowledge, which I don't think he really does. All he's doing is really looking at the source code, and so when he sees references for Half-Life X, which is fairly certain to be code that is working towards a Half-Life 3, although inherently doesn't have to be anywhere close to being a finished product for Half-Life 3, he'll report on that. He also talks in a certain way that is perhaps too potent, for lack of a better term. Back in 2021, he said it wasn't in development at all, because Valve was instead busy working on a game called Citadel, which eventually evolved to Neon Prime and then became Deadlock. Which, yeah, let's also remember Deadlock technically is still being developed on, unless it's being abandoned completely. Is this really the time? Let's just speculate ourselves. Is this a good time to release Half-Life 3? I mean, you aren't going to be pushing PC sales right now. If I was Gabe Newell, I would say let's not put out Half-Life 3 until people can buy computers. And you almost certainly are thinking that after the after the Trump administration ends, assuming it ever does end, tariffs might go back and be better at least, and at that point you're going to have people with three-year older computers than they wanted buying computers like crazy. So I would say 3-4 years from now would be the time that you would put out Half-Life 3. Of course, if I'm Gabe Newell, I might also realize I'm pretty old, and if I want a chunk of change for releasing Half-Life 3, now would be the time to do it. And I'm saying Gabe Newell, but really it's just the secret cabal of people who actually are in charge of Valve, who own shares, and who we really don't know for certain who really is in charge and who really has the power and influence in Valve, since it's a private company. As far as the employees go, since all the employees pretend like there is no corporate structure. But yeah, it kind of would be a terrible time to release Half-Life 3. You're not gonna... I mean, it would be the one thing that would push a lot of people to buy a new computer, but people aren't going to be able to afford it. And again, I don't think a Steam Deck 2 is coming out to do anything amazing and new as far as the new technology with Half-Life 3, and I don't think anything else is coming out as far as an interface device, whether input or output, that would be a new technology. So the thing they had been holding back as far as Half-Life 3 is they wanted to see either some new physical interface thing that was groundbreaking, or some new computer programming software thing. And so then I would have to really ask, what is that new computer programming thing? What about the Source Engine 2 have they added that creates a new game physics concept, or a new visual rendering aspect, or something that would make Half-Life 3 stand out from all the other games? Just adding ray tracing to it even is not going to be enough. Moving on to other speculation, Sackboy has vanished from the PlayStation's intro, causing fans to worry that Little Big Planet's future. Former PlayStation mascot has been removed from its production cast of characters. Although, in fairness, I don't think it is been. I think it's been quite a while since the last Sackboy game came out. Yeah. And is this the Until Dawn movie? Because apparently an Until Dawn movie came out, and I saw the reviews weren't particularly great about it, and it really wasn't following the story of Until Dawn perfectly. After seeing the Until Dawn, that Sackboy is not in the PlayStation Productions intro anymore. PlayStation Productions being the movie studio, I guess. But also they're more interested in Astrobot, and it kind of would make more sense to focus on Astrobot. Yeah. Unless they were going to make a Yoshi's Woolly Yarn game with Sackboy and just compete with Nintendo in that way, which I don't think PlayStation really is trying to do. I think Sackboy is put out to pasture, and so may the company also be put out to pasture. And my fear on that is similar for basically every second-party developer or first-party developer Sony has in general. It does just seem like they are doing a very poor stewardship of those companies. Sony is. Okay, with that, I'm going to pause the recording and take my first break, which at this point I'm just calling them first break. I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. Interesting thing in the dual live there that was playing while I had paused the recording is that it showed a final blow animation, and then the final blow got interrupted. And I didn't think that happened in the playback of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, but I guess it does. So, today I learned, I guess. I may be somewhat distracted going forward. I ordered this corned beef hash, and it had way too much fat on it. Not hash, just corned beef steak. And so I've now got bits of meat stuck in between my teeth, and I've been trying to get it out all day, and poking myself in the gums and bleeding. So yeah, I've been distracted this whole time, and yeah, it's not getting better. South of Midnight, to continue with the Video Games Chronicle article, South of Midnight appears to be a Game Pass hit, but the dev says its role at Xbox isn't to make blockbusters. Now, inherently, that is weird that a company would be told, hey, your role is not to make blockbusters. Wouldn't you want all games to be blockbusters, in the definition of a blockbuster being people are lining up to purchase it? Like, perhaps he meant to say their goal isn't to make quadruple A games, or their goal isn't to make tentpole games that would be highly successful and highly profitable to then fund smaller games. But yeah, blockbuster seems like the wrong word to use. Over 1 million players have played South of Midnight via sales and Game Pass, which, having an over 1 million player base, is quite a success. Again, for a game that I personally just don't feel like was promoted anywhere as much as it should have been. Let's see, will this take us to Steam? I don't think it will. So yeah, you'd expect a little bit more promotion and celebration. What would be really weird is if South of Midnight was the big game that Xbox promoted for like Black Friday. But who knows? Who knows what even Christmas and Black Friday is going to look like this year. Yeah. Apparently a new Echo the Dolphin game is coming, as well as remasters for the first 2 games. Echo and the Tides of Time are being remastered by the original creators. The storyline in Echo the Dolphin is crazy. It like involves, I believe, aliens, if you actually make it to the end. So a new game, the story might be fairly crazy too. Although it's worth pointing out that the game Echo the Dolphin is kind of a crazy experience anyways, in that it was just kind of a early, almost like Metroidvania type game, except for you were playing as a dolphin and you were fighting a lot less enemies, and a lot of it might be closer to something like Up, the games where you're just constantly climbing up and up and up, because there was controlling limitations in the game where you had to get good at controlling a character to reach locations. Not really even too far away from the climbing aspect of Breath of the Wild. The difference, of course, being you're a dolphin and you're going deeper and deeper. Apparently there was a lawsuit with Sega see. Back in 2013, NVIDIA, who I guess was the original creator of Echo the Dolphin, didn't have the rights to Echo the Dolphin IP, and he attempted to crowdfund a spiritual successor called the Big Blue, but this was ultimately unsuccessful. Then he settled a lawsuit with Sega in 2016, which appeared to potentially open the door again for a new Echo title. But yeah, the fact that you have a Kickstarter crowdfunding thing and it fails tells you that the audience there is not particularly high for an Echo the Dolphin game. And yeah, the more I think about it, you definitely are going to be making a different kind of Echo the Dolphin game for it to be successful. You're going to put it in a 3D environment. It is going to be a lot like Subnautica, where you're just swimming around under the ground. You might be collecting a whole bunch of resources. You might be grinding to craft objects. You might just be hunting a lot more. In fact, you're probably going to have to add a lot of different gameplay mechanics to make any of it make sense at all. And that's not even story-wise making sense. I just mean gameplay-wise for it to make sense. Inherently, I never owned a Sega Dreamcast, so I would only play it in small bursts with friends. So, yes, I may have spent at most 40 minutes at playing Echo the Dolphin and gotten absolutely nowhere. And I don't think those Sega games were particularly even that long, so you probably, if you were really good and knew what you were doing, could have beaten Echo the Dolphin 1 in 3 or 4 hours. But yeah, that's my general experience with all Sega games, is that you only get so far. I only got so far. And even in modern times when I can emulate those games, they still just don't feel like things I would really want to sit through and play all the way through. Although in fairness, the same is true for NES games. Like, I wouldn't want to sit through and play Super Mario Bros. 3. Like, I'm not sure I ever even beat Super Mario Bros. 3. And I know I never beat Super Mario Land or Super Mario World, so... yeah, World. For the Super NES. But yeah, I wouldn't want to really sit through that. The only games I'd really want to sit through and see if I could beat would probably be something like Punch-Out, but even then I'd probably use save states and cheat my way through it, and that's only because I think Punch-Out is probably my most favorite NES game. But I have way less time and way more games to play and way more modern games to play in modern times. That really is a case where ROMs, in my mind, are only really good to give to little kids who have never played that many video games in the first place and would see something special in the more difficult games or in games like that when they haven't seen modern video games. But once you put a Nintendo Switch in the hands of a kid, they are probably going to reject the ROMs of pretty much all older games. Pokemon might be a small exception there because it's turn-based and they can overlook a lot as far as the graphics, although they probably won't overlook that much from the graphics of Pokemon. That there is a real argument to remaking more of the old Pokemon games with the Let's Go series, which, yeah, I'm surprised they haven't announced a new Let's Go game that would cover some of the previous generations of Pokemon games. I am kind of interested to see what happens here, what this game looks like. But right now it just has a website with a countdown clock. I wouldn't be surprised though if it isn't much of a change, that it's just higher resolution, better graphics of a 2D Echo game. The Louvre's Nintendo 3DS Auto Guide service is ending after 13 years. The Paris Museum says its new system is taking its place. So I didn't even know the Louvre had a special application that worked with the 3DS. That being said, 3DSs are not available for purchase anymore, and it's probably kind of hard to find replacement parts, even for the Louvre. So moving on to a new system makes a lot of sense. I wonder how these systems really worked, because this is something that every museum should probably have, is some kind of device where you can take pictures of things and it might be able to identify those pictures and tell you more information about it, or it could play personal audio to and do an audio guide and not disturb others. And potentially even pictures you take being converted to gift shop sales, and that you can get prints of those pictures by just like hitting an order now button, or photos you take of even people in the museum might be able to be instantly printed in the gift shop and get you some more revenue. But otherwise, the 3DS is a very awkward sized and shaped object by modern standards for an audio guide device. Yeah. Service allowed visitors to pay €6 to hire a 3DS handheld during their visit. While exploring the museum, the app shows visitors a map and uses geolocation tracking to help them navigate the museum's numerous halls. This also provides information on each piece in the gallery in the form of more than 30 hours of audio commentaries. So a lot of work was put into it. It was spearheaded by Shigeru Miyamoto himself, and that's almost certainly why it exists. It's not clear whether the new system will be another collaboration with Nintendo, or perhaps the Switch Lite handhelds used instead with something entirely different. Neither Louvre nor Nintendo has announced anything. I imagine that it's not a Nintendo collaboration. I imagine it's just going to be a cell phone app or something. And interestingly, it doesn't seem like it actually evokes the camera on the 3DS at all. Here's a great example of the Mona Lisa as far as just the smallest, one of the smallest paintings. People crowd around it constantly, and so you're highly unlikely, if you go to the Louvre, to even see it up close. I And so this is the announcement video here. It's a lot talking to screen, standard situation. So yeah, I would think that the game engine basically for 3DS games was somewhat standard, so they could have taken any game that they had already created for the 3DS and converted it into this audio guide. Wow, they're just watching them walk upstairs while not saying anything. Then they cut. Is there no camera on the 3DS? I could have sworn there was a camera. But maybe the camera faces forward. They're all in Japanese, just talking in Japanese. They start to talk in English later on here. Yeah, there's a camera dot right there. So it's looking towards it. Weirdly, they said this was for sale for the Nintendo 3DS eShop. But I think the 3DS eShop is shut down now, so I don't know if it was on sale for the longest amount of time. Yeah, in 2013 they did release a standalone version. Interesting. So then they sold it to just random people. So barely video game related, but there will be some new app and it will definitely be not really a video game when it comes out. And then I think our final news story, hoping that we opened all the news stories from Video Games Chronicle, here is that Codemaster has confirmed layoffs at the EA-owned studio, shifts focus away from the beloved rally games. Codemaster says some of the staff will be redeployed across the EA. I think it had kind of already been guessed that Codemasters was not going to be making racing games as much, although there's now guesses about what they are making, if anything, or if it's just going to be more layoffs. Moving on to the Gematsu articles now. A brand new Honkai game has been teased at the Honkai Star Rail concert of 2025. Which, yeah, I would assume Honkai games are in the same universe, and that they aren't just kind of a generic description of a style of game. Is this some kind of Pokemon-like game? Is that how Honkai games work? It's tagged as an RPG. Interesting. Okay. Maybe this is the first of the Palworld clones, in the fact that Palworld is kind of a clone of Pokemon, is that Palworld came out, Nintendo is suing them, but not doing it very fast or very successfully, so maybe Honkai's willing to brave that and make a Pokemon style game too. Which we're probably going to need a better term than Pokemon. Creature raising, creature taming, games existed before Pokemon anyways. Let's see, Echo the Dolphin and Echo the Tides of Time remasters announced alongside a third Echo game in Gamatsu. And now I'm going to keep an eye out on these Gamatsu articles to see if any of these link to Steam pages. Apparently there's no plans to port the 100-line Last Defense Academy to additional platforms. 2Kyo Games is still on the brink of going under, quote unquote. Okay. That is a disconcerting statement, certainly to have. So, it was released on Switch and PC via Steam, which there is an example of one that did not get a Steam link clicked on. And this definitely feels like it is a Danganronpa looking game, but it looks like it plays more like a positional placement RPG strategy game, if I was to guess. It's not in early access, and it is rated very positively, so I can at least take it off my fall list, having looked at it. But at a certain point, even with a massive number of people playing it, I don't know if it is going to be a game worth playing, because if the company goes under, it's just going to be a very different narrative and story as far as here's a game that may not even be available for sale. It's the same problem with like the Leisure Suit Larry games. If those get delisted from Steam and don't come back, it becomes even less likely than I'd ever cover them, because what's the point of me covering a game that people can't purchase? The Dungeon RPG, The Quintessential Princesses, Fantasy, the Abyss, and the Magical Academy has been announced for PS4 and 5 and Switch. So, the Quintessential Quintuplets was an anime where there was like 5 quintuplet anime girls that a guy was potentially trying to pick through as far as who he was going to end up eventually marrying. This seems like this is a spin-off that has taken that group of anime girls and turned them into fantasy princesses to make a fantasy RPG. Interesting. It looks like maybe the main male protagonist is not even existing in this game. Which, yeah, that's a different direction. Yeah. The Ring magazine has partnered with Dimps to develop an original boxing game. Development to commence soon. I have never heard of the Ring magazine or Dimps as a company, but I guess it's good to know. It's a Japanese studio, so it's going to be some kind of most certainly Japanese boxing centric boxing game, if I was to guess, which probably isn't too much different from Western boxing games, but it might severely affect who is represented as boxers, which might severely affect how the game goes. Yeah, it is kind of crazy that we don't have like a George Foreman or Muhammad Ali licensed figures showing up in boxing games. Yeah, that is kind of strange that doesn't happen. While I'm thinking about it, yeah, May apparently is a great time to buy anime from at least Crunchyroll or Groove. I think it was Groove. I got on their mailing list, GRUV, and so they've got some anime shows that they're trying to shill and discount somewhat, although not don't think Groove ever has great discounts. Really? There is a high chance. Well, one, I can't really afford to buy anime. That would be stupid for me to do it. I may still end up doing it because I may just be stupid. But more importantly, it's worth pointing out that there is a high chance that physical media is going to suffer a close to death blow, if not a complete death blow, amongst these tariffs. I could just see it very much being the case that the last few factories that press 4K Blu-ray discs and Blu-ray discs in general stop manufacturing them, and DVDs, I imagine, are close to being stopped being manufactured already. But yeah, the demand for 8K TVs, I hear, is also non-existent. So yeah, I think physical media could easily die. Of course, for movies, if Blu-ray discs stop getting pressed for movies, then that decreases the demand overall, and then you're going to start seeing a decreased demand for Blu-ray discs for games being pressed either. And then we're going to have a next generation of consoles that might very well be all digital or all cartridge based. It's been, feels like at least 15 years, probably much longer, since we've had any improvement in size and storage on spinning disk media too, and that's definitely a problem also. Moving on, the side-scrolling runner Turnip Boy Steals the Mail has been announced for PC, which, boy, does this Turnip Boy series really have a great way of announcing itself with interesting subtitle. I don't know if it really is called subtitles in this case, titles, names of the games. The last one I think was Turnip Boy Commits Mail Fraud or something. Probably wasn't mail fraud, it was probably tax fraud. Yeah, I think was the name of it. Let's see. Arashi Gaiden launches July 14th for Steam. Let's look at that. Yeah, and it's harder than fall is, so I already probably made a YouTube short. I also need to go back and continue to work on my YouTube short macros so I can actually make YouTube shorts, otherwise I'm gonna have way too many tabs open, which I probably already do. Tinkerlands launches in early access on May 23rd. Definitely I'm gonna struggle though. Like, I'm gonna struggle between wanting to play Talos Principle and then wanting to work on programming a lot less. Of course, if I could find a balance there, play a little bit of Talos Principle, do a little bit of programming, that'd be great. But I think it's almost a false promise at this point that there is a balance there, that I would have enough energy in a day to do two things in a day, or balance things out in a day. There are increasingly points though where I'm playing games and making footage, which I still haven't scheduled any footage in probably 6 months now. But yeah, there increasingly are times where I'll make footage for 2 or 3 hours and then I'll just start getting sleepy, and at that point maybe I can watch some streaming stuff, but mostly I'm just gonna fall asleep. Yeah, Gears of War Reloaded was announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. I did also update my plugin that rephrases some of these groups of systems, where in particular all consoles I think is not going to be something that's used as a phrase for a while. because I don't know what all consoles means now. Does that include the Switch one, or does it not? Gears of War Reloaded, we can see here these screenshots are kind of blurry. Let's see, it's still on this one. Yeah, you're just not gonna get modern graphic resolutions on such an old game. And yeah, at least they're not going a very soft cell shaded look on it, because you could certainly have tried to soften the image up to the point where the game looks cartoony or childlike. But yeah, I think I would take just kind of low pixel count and instead what it looks like here. Gears of War in particular has to have a certain visual style, otherwise it's gonna fall apart and become laughable. Moving on, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 sales have topped 3 million. Kingdom Come Deliverance overall, or I guess 1, has topped 10 million. What kind of game is that? I think I would know. It's an open world medieval single player game. So it's kind of like Witcher 3 from the looks of it. Interesting. Well, obviously I've seen it and put it on the wish list. I just haven't thought about it that much. And then Honkai Star Rail X Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works collaboration launches July 11th. Mobile game anime crossover experience. And then that's going to bring it to gaming on Linux. And I kind of looked at all of these as far as all the articles, even though gaming on Linux is the worst one to double check on, because of the fact that these articles, I think, get kind of randomized based on the way it goes. But yeah, even on gaming on Linux, the number of articles was fairly small. There is a story-rich mega bundle on Steam. It's an amazing value according to them, not to be missed. Which, let's see this bundle on Steam and get an idea of which of these games do I have wishlisted, which of these games do I own. Interestingly, I found an actual bundle here that I could engage with for $43.77. And a decent number of these are on my wish list. And I would have to suspect that the 3 that are not on my wish list probably should be on the wish list. But even if they weren't good games or games I was interested in, 3 out of what looks like 15 games is not bad. Now what's funny about this is the first time I've ever seen a bundle that feels a lot like a Humble Bundle. $21.58. Wait, why does it say $21.58? Oh yeah, I was misreading it. You save $43, it would cost you $21.58. That's a much better deal. much better deal. Very reasonable. But yeah, I'd like to see this become a trend, certainly, that you have these Humble Bundle like games, that game bundles that show up on Steam, and so you're just not having to go through another vendor to purchase them. Yeah. Pale Beyond might have been the one that I would have said no to. Alright, well, I'm gonna hit a point here as far as how crazy do I want to be. Do I want to buy refurbished Steam Decks before the price goes up? Do I want to spend $21 on a bundle on Steam? Do I want to end up buying anyway a Groove? Which of these dumb ideas will I fall for? Time will only tell. Maybe that's a good reason for me to focus more on playing games too. It's like the more free time I have, the more I am looking at my phone for slick deals instead of playing games. The more shopping I do. Stellaris Biogenesis and free 4.0 Phoenix update is out now. Okay. See that on Steam. We can also see that, yeah, this is a game that I think personally just don't have any interest in, but it is going to get updates, so I'm going to tag it there. A open source evolution sim called Thrive adds curtains, biolumens, and additional environmental events and more. Is this on Steam too? Okay, hold that too. Yeah, another game I'm not really interested in. There is a problem with gaming on Linux that more and more of these are just like affiliate link advertisements for games, but then they're almost always games I've never heard of. So, and I say this every time, but I definitely am mentally going around in circles about, do I want to curate better from Gaming on Linux and only really cover Linux news from Gaming on Linux? You can check out the demo for No Breaks, No Gain, a precision driving game where the skill outshines speed. See how that actually plays. Well, first it's going to advertise customization. So it's a lot of bouncing and avoiding lasers, I guess. Well, if you don't have brakes, you have at least reverse, and it looks like you have acceleration. So yeah, this definitely feels like a different kind of game than a driving racing game. More just a awkward co-op like game. But yeah, that difference isn't inherently bad. Might as well mention it too. I had an amusing thought that I might flesh out as a full suggestion later on for a game called Touch Grass, where it is playing on the meme of going outside and touching grass because you've gamed too much, but then the grass becomes alive and there's only like one blade of grass and it starts running away from you, and so then you would have to chase after the grass to touch it, which then you would think that that might be something like a Paperboy game or something. Is about as far as I thought for the joke concept there. But yeah, you could have it where you would have to move slightly faster than the grass to catch it always, or it would have to go around corners for you to catch it, but then it would have to throw things at you and more obstacles and things like that happens, and you would have to be in some kind of weird urban environment where only one blade of grass exists. You could have some fire, but you'd have to be pretty careful around it, because if there was just an inferno burning all the grass around you and that's why you couldn't touch it, then it would become a different themed game, less comedic, I think. But yeah, it's an interesting thought for the idea of a game, and something that maybe somebody better than me with more free time could program in something like Godot. But yeah, it is almost certainly a game jam game, something you'd make in 48 hours with a small group of people, not something that you'd actually try and sell, because it totally is a mean game. You could see YouTube content creators and streamers playing it for a brief time, but even if you polished it quite a bit and made it a great experience, I just don't think people are going to stick with it. The concept of chasing something is somewhat different for video games, since you're so often being chased. But in a lot of ways, it could also just be like a Pac-Man game, where you're just chasing after ghosts when you eat a power pellet. Let's see, moving on to the Gaming on Linux news. Glass Cannon is the next indie obsession. His next indie obsession. A chill turn-based shoot-'em-up roguelike with wild weapon combos. This looks very simplistic in the visuals. Yeah. I think I would have a hard time here even wanting to make a YouTube short around this. Perhaps this is just an example here of the visuals being overly focused on by me. Here you can see Gaming on Linux is a curated review of it. I'll give it a chance. Warfare Legacy Collection remasters 2 classic Flash strategy games, and it's out now. That 2 is on Steam. Gaming on Linux, really the only one of these that actually managed to have a decent amount of news, despite Cinco de Mayo and Mother's Day and whatever else. Junkyard Space Agency is a Scrappler multiplayer version of Kerbal Space Program. Interesting. I, at this point, don't think you really would want to compare yourself to Kerbal Space Program just because of the pain that is Kerbal Space Program 2 and its development and laying off of the original team. Yeah. I'm still not 100% sure in my head which one of these games I want to do, whether I want to put something on the fall list or tag it, if I'm actually interested in it, which I'm a little interested in it. I think I want to put it on the fall list. Of course, 8,000 things on the fall list. Cannot load the fall list page because of that. Still a big issue. And what I'm going to almost certainly find out that once I start going through all the news feed, I'm going to find that only a small fraction of the games on my fall list have ever put out any kind of updates or news. So I may get rid of all of the games on my news feed, or at least most of them, and then still not be anywhere close to getting it down to a reasonable 1,000 games on the fall list. Moving on, Zelda 64 recompiled, Majora's Mask adds modding support, texture pack support, and optimizations and more. Let's see. It's funny, Zelda 64 recompiled is a project to play The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask on modern platforms, but you would think it would be a recompilation of Ocarina of Time, which would be the first Nintendo 64 Zelda game. Yeah. I saw a video talking about how the recompilations of these Nintendo games just has some advantages over the emulation of the same games, in that when you recompile it, there are just extra tweaks one can do. Is that the Minecraft chest? I do believe it is. And in fact, I think everything in there might have been some Minecraft-like references. So they're using a very low-end graphics card there to show macOS support. Let's see. Texture packs support probably is where you would get better graphics, but graphics may not change enough. Part of the problem, certainly with watching this video though, is since I never played Majora's Mask in the first place, it would be hard to tell what is new and what is old as far as elements being added. Sad Pepe meme image over there. Apparently they've got a whole mod reel. Better Song of Double Time Mead. Odd. Move while aiming mod. Well, that definitely seems like that would be helpful. No draw distance mod. Like, inherently, mod support is something that is going to only be available. The dab mod, he's dabbing. Opponent control overhaul mod. So I wonder if there's a different recompilation project for Ocarina of Time, which, yeah, I'd still like to play that if I was going to do anything, but you're still in a very weird situation where there's basically no way any content creator can play these games without Nintendo being upset enough to sue them. Yeah. Mario Mask mod to look like Mario and seemingly control like Mario. But yeah, some of these mods, practical improvements. Doomport mod. Some of these very much silly improvements. This Narrow seems to get around. I recognize him as a modder. Although it may be like a name that just gets used by multiple people. Yeah, I imagine Majora's Mask would be a hard game for me to play anyways, because I probably need like a walkthrough just to know where to go to get things. Future updates. More Nintendo 64 recompiled projects. Now, my thought and hope had been that with the progress of one recompiled game, it would very quickly lead to the recompilation of basically all Nintendo 64 games. And while that may eventually happen, it doesn't seem like it's moving as fast as one would have hoped. It definitely seems to me like there's only 3 or 4 recompiled games that you could play on PC from the Nintendo 64 era instead of dozens. Certainly that's nice new news. Weirdly not reported by Gamatsu or Video Games Chronicle, and probably won't ever be. Easy Delivery Cove is a strange and spooky delivery driving sim with a demo worth checking out. Which, yeah. I really just don't know if I trust Gaming on Linux recommendations well enough. And then Wine 10.7 was released with an interesting loading time performance improvement. Let's see, user Fault FD support to improve write watches performance, support for float format conversions in Windows codecs, more work on the PDB backend. I have no idea what any of that is. Various bugs. Let's see. In Streets of Rage 4, the game was sometimes loading levels for about 1 to 1.5 minutes, while this was happening almost instantly on Windows. The performance problem is coming from .NET code memory management garbage collector code. The huge performance issue was caused not only by direct turnaround difference of write-watched memory access, but also by specifics of the algorithm, which was using different memory pools strategies effectively based on memory access timing, and was resulting in an especially unfortunate pattern hitting write protected for write watch pages much more often than it normally would. So since something has changed either in the game or in the .NET core it's using, and the difference in load levels is not that dramatic without this optimization, but it still is some 6 to 8 seconds without the patcher instead of 1.5 to 2 seconds with the patch on Windows, suggesting that it still provides a huge performance improvement, at least for .NET Core memory management. Okay, that was a big wall of text that I probably shouldn't have read out, but yeah. Wine continuing to improve to fix specific games and programs, and in general just trying to improve everything and improve performance, which will eventually end up in Proton, which is what SteamOS uses. And then our last Gaming on Linux article says the road trip management RPG Keep Driving has added controller support and is working on being Steam Deck verified. I feel like we'd already talked about this, but I bet not. It feels like my macro is pretty good. I don't remember Gaming on Linux being so good about curating their reviews. Maybe he's getting better at that, or maybe I wasn't following Gaming on Linux as a curator. Might be actually a mistake to follow him as a curator anyways. Alright, well then that's going to bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, which I'm not sure how many of these are going to be important. Compulsion Game Boss again saying AI usage is not mandated at Xbox. Although I guess it's inaccurate to say again saying. He said it once and then several of my news sources reported on it. So yeah. NCSoft has invested in a Texas-based studio founded by id Naughty Dog alums, The invest is aimed at helping the studio bring its first game, Defect, to the finish line. Okay. Good luck on that, I suppose. That's all you can say. And then here's how GameDeveloper.com puts the whole legal issue. Bungie's content cycling on Destiny 2 causes legal kerfuffle in a plagiarism suit. Protecting yourself from plagiarism accusation is an unusual reason to preserve your game, but here we are. So yeah, they failed to preserve the evidence and preserve their game, which at the point that they probably vaulted the game, they probably were not in a legal battle. Although for any big company, you probably should just assume that you're always going to be in a legal battle, so you should probably be preserving as much evidence to defend yourself as possible. There are actual rules and regulations, or at least recommendations, on how far back you should protect and preserve information, depending on the information and depending on what industry you are in. Obviously, if you work for a bank, you are expected to preserve a lot of information for a long time. If you work for a public library, you probably don't have to preserve much information for very long. But yeah, there definitely would be standard things that have to be preserved to protect you legally. Yeah. Stuff gets preserved very often even after companies go out of business. Like Dish TV still verifies employment records for some reason of people who worked at not Best Buy and not Circuit City. What was the movie chain? It was Blockbuster. Yeah, Blockbuster was the movie chain. So there's a meme that shows up every few years saying, if you're ever applying to a job, just say you work for Blockbuster, because there's no way to verify if that's true or not, and it's totally always then shut down as, yeah, it's totally true. If you were going to lie about working somewhere, lie about working at some small independent company, or better yet, call yourself self-employed for many years, and they really won't have any way of arguing against that. I guess they could ask for evidence that you were self-employed for those years, but they probably wouldn't really even do that much. Anyways, I'm rambling. If we're really good, we'll be done. If I move really fast, we'll be done in just slightly over 3 hours. We don't have any video game news articles. They didn't open up either for some reason. So there's still work to be done on my macros. And you know, I also realized that I could probably compress two variables into one and accomplish the same thing with using a little bit less RAM. Although I don't think it's really even worth changing the code to do that. Leave that for the next time I rewrite the code from scratch, or almost completely rewrite the code. Because yeah, I don't think the amount of RAM that's saved in that case is going to be enough for the effort to fix it, to rewrite it, and make changes. Anytime you make changes, you increase the odds of something going wrong or adding a bug. Anyways, we're going to look at all the new games that came out on Steam, which that too is going to be, I think, a fairly short list. I had what felt like just $60, maybe $80 games get opened for the entire weekend, which that seems a little low. So I'm starting to yawn now. I guess I also should say that I am finally, through no real desire of my own, I am shifted my sleep schedule to the point where I'm waking up at like 10 in the morning or so, and I am then staying awake till at least midnight of the same day without taking any naps in the middle. So almost normal person schedules somehow made it to that point, at least for the past couple days. I'm sure it will start sliding and changing again later. Yeah, I have. So let's go ahead and point out, there we go, a lot of non-English games showing up. So I feel like there is an argument to start curating games and not bothering to even show things that don't support English language, because it's just too easy for me to not scroll down here. But I've only been a little bit censorious in that I'm, because of YouTube, forced to not show adult games, and because of just the high number of Russian only language asset flip garbage games, that I exclude Russian language only games. Otherwise, I have it set up where I will show off every single game on Steam that covers any other language. But it does occur to me that maybe the doesn't support English should just automatically be closed. And I'll think about that, but I just don't think it's really going to go that way. We have like a photography game, but the visuals are so bad. It's free to play online co-op, and you can see it's mixed review. That kind of game's visuals is kind of crazy to exist in modern times. So I was gonna say, what I'm thinking might work is, I noticed a new feature when I was looking in the OBS settings, trying to see if I could turn off some settings to maybe increase the odds of my game not crashing. What it can do is split videos manually. You can have it split videos by size, you can have it split videos by time, duration, but you can also have it split videos by manual trigger. So what I'm thinking could happen is I could make a shortcut, and I may not even need to. You would think this one would have supported the English language. I mean, it's even English description here, an English title. English full audio is considered not English support because it's not interface or subtitles. I imagine interface is the thing that your game has to have an English interface to not get this warning. Maybe this warning has been updated, and that's why we're seeing more games labeled as not English supporting. Anyways, I lost my track of thought there. So yeah, I'm thinking I can maybe just make a shortcut that I would press on the keyboard and it would split the video. And if it split the video, then at that point, I probably would also have the shortcut start streaming at that point. And so that probably would become a advanced scene switch or macro, just so that one key triggered multiple things in an easily, or at least relatively easily programmable way. So I would go through all these games, I'd warm up, talk about whatever nonsense I'm talking about, and then go. Then when I got to the end of the stream, I would do a wrap up like I usually do, and I would hit a key like I was going to stop streaming, but actually what would happen is I would start streaming, which at that point 100 Aztec cats, they're getting really crazy with the cat games. I would then continue to stream, or begin the stream, going through the video game news, thus putting all the boring warm-up talk at the end where it really belongs, while still having me be able to warm up and ramble. So then I guess the thought, if I was going to do that, and I'm just thinking all this out as I speak, would be, what do I say at the beginning of those streams if things are going to be twisted around like that? You want to say something, but probably not much of anything. Probably just learn to say something along the lines of, now we're going to go through all the new games on Steam. Yeah, it almost needs to be a unrecognizable transition. Of course, if people are like talking to me on the chat at that point, if I ever become big enough that I have massive numbers of people talking to me on the chat, that would be awkward and weird to just stop paying attention to the stream. There's a lot more that needs to be done the more I think about it. I need text at the top that says just pre-recorded footage somewhere, just to be honest about it. And I would need the microphone, I bet, to just mute itself would probably be a nice move when it starts playing back the video. I'm still not sure what the whole process of playing back the video would be as far as the pre-recorded video. And then I need the stream to end after the video is done, which I'm not 100% sure that I can detect that either. So I think those are the major elements I need to continue to investigate. Yeah. But yeah, like I said at the beginning, I took one small mental step towards the idea of changing things around. And yeah, you gotta be kind of careful here, because if the stream just kept on going, that would kind of suck. Or if the stream stopped early, that would kind of suck. If the internet drops, nobody's gonna be around to look at it. another setting that I've noticed in OBS is the fragmented MP4s is a separate file format from MP4s. You'd think it would just be the new default for MP4s. Tower defense game. Is there any possibility this might be interesting? Maybe. Yeah. Since I'm running out of things to say, I also had an interesting thing. I think it's probably algae based, although inherently it's easy to just say, ah, it's just algae for anything, but I definitely was feeling some gassiness in my lungs, or one lung in particular, and yeah, it's starting to get a little painful. So if I end up dead for some reason, investigate the lungs, I guess. Heroin Hero. No, I don't think I'd ever cover a game like that. It's a little too much. And that probably is an example of how the Schedule 1 drug game is going to just encourage people to take it even further. Alright, well, at the moment, we're still doing the content in a linear fashion. And yes, I don't have any follow game news to go through. So I've managed in this short day to go less than 3 hours. That being said, I am not 100% sure that we didn't miss some articles, but I'm fairly certain we did. I checked a lot of my news sources just to double check. But also this is probably because of Cinco de Mayo. So anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.